Piano, an instrument with an extensive and rich history, an instrument that spanned the centuries from maker to maker into hands of some of the greatest talents known to man, an instrument that can be played by a shrieking toddler lured by a single kick-out bar. Now, from amateurs to professional concert pianists, there comes a point where technique will undoubtedly enter the question. Now, it could be your first staccato notes that you're playing as if you touched a hot stove, all the way to playing a trill with your 4 or 5 fingers. Today, we'll be going progressively from easy to arguably one of the hardest techniques in piano that even professionals hate. A grace note is essentially one of those tiny shits that appears before a regular diabetic fat note. It is a quick note that is not counted, basically like an ornament on a Christmas tree, meant to fucking decorate. Now, known more complicatedly as a ciaccatura, it doesn't quite deserve this long name for how easy it is. Now, these tiny notes are only known as this monstrosity name if they have a cross going through it, and not to be confused with Jesus Christ. If it doesn't have one, it's called appoggiatura, which essentially just sounds like a fucking regular 8th note. Now, the difference is that an appoggiatura is slightly leaning on the main note, highlighting the grace note itself. Does it matter? No. Now, commonly known as the slide, the glissendo's only purpose is to impress a girl that thinks you can play the piano with flair, but it doesn't work if you're spamming the move on hot cross buns. Now, a glissando is a continuous seamless glide between notes, something that sounds like this. Now, before trying this out, you might think to yourself, hey, this isn't that hard. And you'd be right. Now, what makes a glissando often uncomfortable for beginners is the fact that they're using their fingers to rub against the keys, and coming from a guy, this hurts more than period cramps. Now, what you're supposed to play is the first key like so, and then turn your fingers so that your fingernails bear the full pain of childbirth.
Moderate, severe, very severe.
Now, trills are another musical ornament that revolves around the repetition of 2 notes, and while Mr. Sins might use this for a different purpose, in piano the only purpose is to look sad while you contemplate about nothing. Now, even though professionals will tell you that using your 1, 2, 2, 3 or any adjacent fingers to play the trill is incorrect, they also forgot to mention that you're mentally impaired. Now, adjacent fingers are not recommended because one finger might affect the other, just like the amount of air forces sold depends on the number of short people that exist. Now, even with the incorrect technique, trills become progressively harder to play, especially hitting those 3-4 fingers that feels like you have carpal tunnel. Now, scales in piano are the building blocks to a lot of later techniques to be discussed. Now, there are a series of notes that's built upon patterns of whole or half steps, or to put it in business major terms, black and white keys. Now, most pieces are based on one specific scale, such as Rachmaninoff's Canon in E minor, Bach's Prelude in C major, and Fur-Elise's in Drake's favorite scale, A minor. Now, what makes scales hard is the physical coordination required to learn inconsistent finger patterns. Now, some distances between keys can have greater distances between them that amateurs are not used to, but nothing is too far for Drake to travel to. Now, apart from being convinced that every single term in piano is Italian, now we're starting to cook with hot grease straight from Popeyes. Now, arpeggios are essentially chords broken down into their primary notes, and so this technique creates a nice flowing sound. Of course, this is an example of an arpeggio played at the highest level, and before you claim that you can play one by playing C, E, G, E, C, let's not forget that you have bills to pay as a computer science major. Now, what's even more difficult are two-handed arpeggios, and in my eyes, they can be broken down into hard and nightmare modes.
my God.
Now, two-handed arpeggios can be referred to as arpeggios that might require both hands to complete one single progression. For example, you might play an arpeggio starting from your right hand, but then ending up on your left. Now, going back to that extreme example, take Chopin's Etude in C major opus 10 number 1 that's played by Denis Zhdanov here. Now, looking at the sheet music, we can see that the right hand is playing an intense arpeggio all the way, until it hits the final 2 notes, which is then taken on by the left hand, completing the arpeggio. Now, the nightmare version of this are individual arpeggios that are simultaneously played by both hands. An example of this is Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 in E minor, Opus 11, famously played in the final round of the 18th International Chopin Piano Competition. Now, dissecting this 19-page piece, we can see that at its height, it consists of a large amount of two-handed arpeggios that take on an insane amount of finger independence, coordination, and practice to not only play the right notes, but keep steady time and dynamics. Now, your hands might as well just be 2 spiders at this point. Now, glissendos, while painful, aren't particularly hard to do. Now, once you evolve them like fucking Snorlax, you get octave glissendos. Now, an octave is basically the same note, let's say C, but played at different frequencies. Now, what makes octave glissendos hard is the fact that you can't use your fingernails as a riot shield, and so there's much greater pain and increased risk of injury. Now, the proper technique can be achieved in 2 steps. A, picking up the phone, and B, dialing the emergency room. Now, double thirds involves playing 2 notes simultaneously that are third apart. And while you might think that, hey, that's not that hard, after putting down your coloring book, crayons, and not playing staccato, you'll realize that once you play fast and legato, you're cooked. Now, playing double thirds staccato allows your hands to readjust each time, but legato, meaning playing smooth, freezes your hand in one position. Now, in this way, double thirds and even double sixths become extremely difficult to play at the real tempo required. Now, one of the hardest techniques in piano is the 4-5 trill because the way your hand is arranged. Now, first of all, your 4th and 5th finger are weak as shit. Like, take off your socks and try to bend your pinky toe. That shit is not moving. Now, apart from this, your 4th finger shares a tendon with your 5th finger, and so when you're flailing that useless 5th finger around, your 4th finger is also flailing around. Now, to counter this, most pianists use one of 2 techniques. Now, the first technique is using your wrist and forearm to gain more power and stability, but this is often futile, so most pianists go with option 2. Giving up. Now, of course, I didn't cover every single technique ever discovered in piano, so if this video gets 10 likes, I'll do a part 2. Yeah! 10K, let's get it.
Grass low, keep your pole and always watch the snake. Be careful who you trust, cause they'll cross you like Tim Hardaway.